Hello and welcome back to the MediFit Wellness Education Exercise Series, Part 2. Again, I have with me Chad Earl, Certified Personal Trainer and Nutritionist, and I'll be your host for this segment, Larry Love. And what we're going to demonstrate is the dynamic versions of exercises for the beginner. So, shall we start?
Let's do it.
Well, we're going to first start off with a step up, okay? So this is a dynamic version to work your quads, and it's a great way to also work your balance. So what we're going to have Chad do is demonstrate about 5 step ups on each leg, and just we're going to point out some key points. If you notice, his hips are completely aligned with his knees and his ankles. Also his shoulders are retracted, and if you look at his core, it makes him taller. His posture is elongated. Why don't you switch to the other foot for me, Chad? So you kind of get an inside view of his legs, and one of the things we want to reiterate is that we want that hip, knee, and ankle to work together as one unit, thus giving us what we call a concentric exercise movement of the quads and the hamstrings. Chad, what are some of the key components with doing this exercise? What's something to keep in mind?
Larry, you want to first make sure that that entire foot, that heel, is on the top of the box. You don't want to start out here with part of the front of the box, coming up through the front part of the foot. That puts a lot of strain on the anterior part of the patella, that front knee, and so it could create a lot of stress on the meniscus and patella tendon. The second aspect would be the foot itself alignment. You don't want to be here at an angle or slightly inside. You want to be neutral with both feet actually, and so you kind of really straighten out the interior rotator parts of the hip. So when I step up, I apply force through this heel, and I step through, and as I step through, I can actually plant and reach with my torso as if I'm going to head the ceiling.
Now, Chad, how would a dynamic or movement-oriented exercise be different from a holding or isometric exercise?
That's a good point. With this, why it's a progression that it involves a lot of intramuscular coordination. There's a balance aspect to it, there's a change of level aspect to it, and there's a cardiorespiratory aspect to this too. I mean, so it's a metabolic-oriented exercise versus that isometric, where you do get a certain level of intensity, but this gets the heart, the lungs, the joints, the nervous system, all having to coordinate to give you the outcome of movement, balance, stability, contraction. It's a very tough and demanding exercise.
So in our first exercise series for the beginner, we had a simulated isometric exercise of a wall sit.
Yes.
When would I know to progress to a active or movement dynamic step up?
Well, that's a good point. With any exercise, there's a couple of points that you can intensify it with. One point would be the height. And so you can see here that my foot is, oh I'm sorry, rather my knee is lower than 90 degrees. And so if I want to intensify this, I would add more boxes, and so my step becomes parallel. And from this position, it really activates more muscular fibers. You see, there's 2 ways that you want to intensify the activity. One is use the biggest muscle that you can. You can see that my thigh is the largest muscle of my body. And the second part is a higher percent of the muscle to be utilized at a time. And that's the intensity factor. And with this exercise, the intensity is measured by the height of the step and the amount of steps I would perform in the time allotted.
Perfect. Now let's go over to our upper body dynamic exercise, which is the wall push-up. And as demonstrated in our first video, we had an isometric hold where Chad was holding for a series of time. This time he's going to move as many reps as he can in a series of time. How long would you suggest you do a dynamic exercise for?
Again, depending on the individual's fitness level, 15 seconds to a minute. And if a minute is not as challenging, you can take this wall push-up and perform it on a lower base, like at home, a countertop or a couch. If that still is not challenging enough, You can perform it on the knees. And it looks like so. Again, keeping the alignment. If you need more intensity than that, then you pop to the toes, and now you have your basic push-up. So those are 3 to 4 major progressions, beginning with that wall push-up, a mid-level change, be it a couch, a sofa, a stable table, a modified push-up on the knees, and fourthly, a basic push-up. Again, how do you know when to progress? When you can perform either more than 35 in a minute, or it's not challenging enough for you, and you're no longer getting that muscular burn that you're used to when you first started.
Chad, let's address some dynamic balance. Now, in our first video, we utilized just a single planar movement for balance. What would be a dynamic progression we could do for the advanced beginner? So, could you show me a version of that?
Well, a really challenging addition would be to change your proprioception. And another way to look at proprioception is eyesight. And so a very demanding exercise that you can do simply at home is to take this, which seems very basic, and to then close the eyes and perform that same activity and try to count as many times as you can do it without touching down with the same foot that's in motion, and work your way up to 25 to 30 repetitions with your eyes closed without touching the ground with the foot that's in motion.
Okay, next we're going to go to our dynamic core series. So we're going to have Chad perform what we call a dynamic bridge. In our first video, our bridge was demonstrated by Chad in just a holding position. But for the progression level, we're going to actually have Chad go into continuous movement. So Chad, why don't you demonstrate that for me, please? And as you see right here, still the key points of Chad's knee through his shoulder, the alignment is still erect at the top of the exercise. Chad, what's some of the other things we want to consider with movement patterns of this exercise?
Again, just because you have one aspect of the body that's in motion doesn't mean you're at liberty to move every aspect of the body. So you want to maintain rigidity in the core, which is that nice abdominal vacuum, that neck and spine above the waist is staying locked in, so your shoulder blades are still locked in position, your neck is still stable, but you want to release and extend the pelvic and sacroiliac areas of that lower back and spine complex.
Perfect, Chad. And lastly, we're going to have you flip over and we're going to put you in what we call our 4-point quadruped position. In the first video, we had you extending your lower extremity on one side and holding. Now what we're going to add to that is a dynamic movement where we're involving the upper extremity as well. So can you do a demonstration for that, please? Okay. So as you can see, Chad is extending his right lower extremity, extending his left upper extremity, and that progression right there can be progressed where he touches both of them to the ground at the same time and lifts them up at the same time. What that does is give us great upper body stabilization, specifically the shoulder and the scapula. It also targets the glutes, but it also gives a great stretch of our hip flexors and extensors, and it also allows for great dorsiflexion of the foot. This is a great total body exercise to really work on balance, coordination. And Chad, what would you say some of the key components to remember to prevent injury here?
Again, it seems to be a prevailing theme, and that is that core stability, that vacuumness, that control of the navel near the spine, that nice rigidity there. You don't want to let go of the abdominal muscle group while you're dynamically moving. So stay vacuum tight, use the glute and the trap muscle, the big muscle behind the shoulders to move, and keep the front muscle groups, the chest, and the abdominal region locked in position. Breathing is rhythmic. You want to breathe out as you lift, breathe out as you lower, and keep those breaths shallow so you can maintain that nice tight vacuum in the abdominal region.
So Chad, in review, as we conclude this exercise segment, going from a static or isometric to a dynamic exercise program, what are some of the key advantages to that?
Well, I tell you, one, as you can see, I'm getting a little bit of a glow here. It really stimulates the metabolic system. You're going to get a heart and lung benefit, a cardiovascular conditioning benefit. You're going to get some neuromuscular feedback, so a person's balance, their coordination is going to improve. And so this is why we combine both types of workouts. It's a strengthening type of workout in workout A, and in workout B, it's a little bit more of a metabolic, cardiorespiratory, and coordination focus.
Well, Chad, I'd like to thank you for your time. You did an excellent job.
Thank you, Larry Love.
And stay tuned for the next progression of exercise, where we add some modalities.
Oh, looking forward to that.
You'll be there. Bye.